Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about the Gothic style architecture from the late Middle Ages. The Gothic period is characterized by a much more highly developed style from the earlier medieval times, which had come to be regarded as crude and barbaric. The Gothic style became characterized by several new main design elements: Gothic arches, flying buttresses, ribbed vaults, gargoyles, and stained glass. The churches of this period became very tall, decoratively elaborate, and rich in light and color on the interior. Before the Gothic period, the only way to build tall buildings was to build thick, bulky walls, which led to dark, heavy interiors. The Gothic period began building tall, thin walls filled with stained glass. These towering walls of light would have been incredibly impressive to people living in small, dark homes, and they would have been a powerful symbol of God. The pointed arch is one of the major design innovations that made building to these great new heights possible. A pointed arch is an archway with curved sides that meet at a point, rather than a smooth semicircular curve. This design was first used in medieval Islamic architecture, where engineers realized it concentrated the stress of the building and allowed for taller arches, thinner walls, and much more interior space. The second Gothic innovation that allowed us to build to new heights is the flying buttress. The buttressing system reduces the structural need for broad expanses of thick walls. It serves to support the lateral weight pushing a wall outwards from the use of stone vaulted ceilings. It carries the weight across and down to the ground. This also allows the window openings to grow vastly larger. Here's a diagram to look at it a little bit more closely. The flying buttress serves to support the lateral weight, again, pushing a wall outwards from the use of the stone vaulted ceilings. What the flying buttress does is it carries the weight across and down to the ground. Essentially, it's like an arm propping up the wall. Here's a quick look at the flying buttresses on the backside of Notre Dame de Paris. The final Gothic innovation that allowed us to build to new heights is the ribbed vault. The ribbed vault is like a groin vault, but is reinforced by a stone rib that carries the weight of the vaulted surface across wide expanses. Thin stone panels fill the space between the ribs. This greatly reduced the weight and thus the outward thrust of the vault. The ribs transmit the load downward and outward to specific points, very similar to the flying buttress. Usually, rows of columns or piers then take the rest of that weight to the ground. With the advancements of the pointed arch, the flying buttress, and the ribbed vault, Gothic cathedral walls could now be filled with large expanses of stained glass. Tracery is an architectural term used primarily to describe the stone elements that divide and support the stained glass in a Gothic window. This typical form of tracery that you're looking at in the slide is called twin lancet plus oculus, which consists of two tall, thin windows with a pointed arch tops, the lancets, and a round trefoil or quatrefoil opening above them, the oculus. Masons started applying those same patterns to surfaces other than window openings. This is known as blind tracery, a decorative effect first applied on the west facade of the Church of Saint Nicaise at Rez in the Champagne region of France. So, in other words, tracery punctures the whole way through an object, and blind tracery does not. The large, round, stained glass window, called a rose window, is another common design motif of Gothic churches. From the exterior, they may not look as colorful, but from the interior, they create a powerful display of light and color. Another way that color was added to the great cathedrals is through paintings illustrating religious subject matter, altarpieces, painted ceilings, and vaults. This particular piece of art here is called a triptych, which is a painting made of a center panel and two wing panels that hinge to fold over the center panel, making a closed box wall hanging. The outside of these door panels might also be carved or painted, but in quiet colors so that when it's opened during a church service, they would provide a really brilliant display of color. With people unable to read and write, the stained glass windows and triptychs can tell them the stories of the Bible. All of this color and elaborate detail was also used to awe and persuade churchgoers. You might also see altarpieces such as this plyptych made of multiple panels, not just 3 panels like the triptych. Let's take a look at a few decorative design motifs that also bring visual interest to Gothic cathedrals beyond color. The first is the trefoil. The trefoil is a cluster of 3 leaves shown in the top left. Here you're seeing that design motif in stonework. Below it, you see what's called a quatrefoil, which is a cluster of 4 leaves. And that is also done in stonework and filled with stained glass. On the right, there's another design motif called a crocket. We might see a crocket also as a projecting leaf-shaped ornament. We also might see a crocket as a finial on the top. So having that projecting leaf-shaped ornament on the bottom is highlighted by the red brackets. There are also the projections that support sort of that weird dragon monkey thing and also project out of the top. Which leads me to grotesques and gargoyles. They are meant to amuse or to frighten. They are both decoration and also to teach or convey messages. The cathedrals of France are the best examples of Gothic style. The following are several of the most famous French Gothic architectural works. This is Notre Dame de Chartres. It is considered high Gothic style, which refers to work between 1150 and 1250, and uses pointed arches and vaults. Something I wanted to note here is that Notre Dame means Our Lady in French, so don't be confused when you see it attached to names of other cathedrals in France, not referring to the Notre Dame like as in the one you know about from the Hunchback movie, which is actually Notre Dame de Paris, meaning Our Lady of Paris. Sainte-Chapelle is the best known Rayonnant-style cathedral, which refers to the elaborate decoration in the work from about 1230 to 1325, when radiating lines of tracery became big. The great rose windows of many French cathedrals are Rayonnant style. Saint-Maclou is an example of the flamboyant style, literally meaning flame-like, which refers to a late style of French Gothic design where very complex tracery and elaborate and excessive decorative detail was used. I'm going to go back a few slides to show you at Chartres, where we also see a mixture of the two styles. If you take a look at this image again of the Cathedral of Chartres, you can see that the two towers are done differently. So the tower on the left is done in the flamboyant style. It was added later when the flamboyant style became popular. Moving along to English Gothic. English Gothic was less dramatic than French. One of their special characteristics is fan vaulting, which uses extra ribs in the stone vaulting. A standout characteristic of the Gothic style translated in the Netherlands is the openness created by using clear glass and the use of white paint, creating a simple and clean aesthetic. Italy never really got away from the Greek classical orders entirely. So you will see things like Roman semicircular arches and Corinthian column capitals mixed in with their Gothic style. A variety of town buildings also used the Gothic style, but converted the design elements, especially the vaulting, from stone to wood elements. Colleges and universities were also growing significantly during this time period and were making use of the new design style in their now needed larger facilities. This image is the dining hall of St. John's College at Oxford. The wooden trussed roof is called hammer beam style. This structure uses a large bracket to support, so you have a large bracket on the side, to support a Gothic arch so that it can span a greater distance than a regular triangle truss system could. The invention of gunpowder in the late Middle Ages led to the castle becoming an obsolete building type. The wealthy and powerful began to live in large houses without the defensive mechanisms like walls and towers that had been necessary during the previous several centuries of war. In England, these were called manors. More elaborate houses approached the scale of miniature palaces. In this house of a wealthy merchant, almost a small palace, the hall or principal room of the main living floor is ornamented with an elaborately carved fireplace overmantel. Each of the doors of wood paneling is set in an elaborately carved frame. Notice the Gothic elements like the pointed arch above the door. This triptych showcases an interior of a wealthy homeowner. Leaded glass windows, an arched niche, hooded fireplace. The settle has carved pointed arches, and the table has a shaped base. The far right panel also shows the tradesman in his home workshop. The later Middle Ages saw the development of a variety of trades and crafts, so that shops, both retail and workshops, appeared in towns. A shop was typically open-fronted towards the street, with a table or counter for wares and work, and storage space towards the rear. John XIV, a merchant who traded with Bordeaux, started building this house around 1290. A residence and place of business, it stood on one of the busiest streets in medieval Southampton. Now restored to its mid-14th century appearance by the removal of later additions, it is equipped with replica period furnishings. Most of the furniture in this late medieval bedroom came from the Château de Villeneuve-Lembron in the Auvergne region of France, property of Rigaud Aurel. The room, fitted with a fireplace and wood paneling, features a half-tester bed, high-back 1- and 2-seat chairs, a stool, bench, chest, and dresser. Until the 16th century, the bed was simply a boarded box completely surrounded by curtains. Cords were attached to the ceiling to hold the draperies. However, sometimes a light framework was constructed for that purpose. In the palaces and castles, these draperies were sometimes made of rich fabrics. In the 16th century, the bed began to assume the contour of the Elizabethan bed, having 4 wooden posts and a headboard. The amount of wood needed to construct the frame, headboard, footboard, and canopy, along with the vast amount of fabric, made the tester bed the most expensive piece of furniture listed in household inventories. The tester bed was a luxury for most individuals. Even kings could not afford to furnish each bedroom with a tester bed. During a trip, it was common for the king to send the royal bed ahead of him to ensure comfortable sleeping accommodations upon arrival. This drawing illustrates the method of tying the canopy drapery into sort of a pear-shaped bundle, which is called the tester or canopy, that is attached to the ceiling by a cord. Servants, on the other hand, would have just slept on the floor on loose cushions of straw or stuffed mattresses called beds. By the 15th century, more sophisticated tables appeared and replaced the trestle tables we talked about during the early medieval period. They remained portable and adaptable, but have more shapely bases than just the look of a sawhorse. This French Gothic table has a hinged top, enabling the size to double when it's unfolded. Until the late 16th century, chairs were still relatively rare. The chair during medieval times was regarded as a symbol of authority, and it was used its use was restricted to the master of the house and to distinguished guests. The finest castles seldom had more than 2 chairs. Chests, settles, stools, and benches were generally used for seating. The portion below the seat usually formed a box, the seat being hinged to give access to the box, essentially a modified chest. A common design motif you keep seeing on these pieces of furniture is the linen fold pattern. We also saw it on John XIV's workbench. Originally, the term cupboard was used to describe an open framework or an open structure fitted with boards or shelves to hold cups. Cup, board. Here we see it becoming an enclosed piece of furniture. This cupboard with a decorative linen fold design and also has functional ironwork. In France, these elaborate cupboards are called armoires, and in England, an ambry. In general, they were used as a place to store arms and other possessions, and was especially used as a place for keeping food. A credence was used in the Great Hall to also store and serve food. This example shows the craftsmanship of French joiners working in the Gothic style. The credence is designed with elaborate pierced tracery, a finely carved apron with pendants, linen fold panels, and a lower shelf for display. The shaped lower apron is in the form of pointed arches. The chests discussed in the earlier Middle Ages are still used in the Gothic period as a receptacle for storing clothes, wall hangings, and other possessions, and as a traveling box for carrying these possessions on a journey. Chests now are less crudely designed and show elements of the Gothic design styles that are becoming popular. Take another look and identify the Gothic design motifs you see in this chest. And finally, tapestries also evolved as a form of artwork and began to display history and nature in a network of symbols. This famous example, the unicorn tapestries, is read as the tale of the hunt for the elusive magical unicorn. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.